Hey there, glad you could join us, The Bruce Collins Show. Our guest today is Steve Bonta, the publisher of the New American Magazine. This promises to be a lively discussion on the issues facing us today. Welcome back to The Bruce Collins Show. I'm Bruce Collins, the Baron of Broadcasting. My co-host is Chad the Odometer Miles. Our guest today is Steve Bonta, the publisher of the New American Magazine. I expect a very lively discussion today on the issues facing our country and our world. If you want to join the Bruce Collins Show community, you're free to join our page on Facebook. And also, we appreciate it when you like our videos and subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. I also have another YouTube channel called Bruce Collins Reacts and Stuff that you may also enjoy. And now, on with the show. Allow me to introduce my co-host, Chad Miles, and also Christopher Cartwright. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, Bruce.
Hey, Bruce.
You know, the studio looks different tonight.
Are you teleporting to the Waffle House again?
No, I always have to use the car for that.
Hey, Bruce, has anyone ever stopped to tell you how great you are?
Why, no, that's never happened. I'm touched that you would say that, though.
I didn't say it. I was just wondering if anyone has been that delusional to say it.
Well, what have you been up to, Christopher?
I'm training attack chicken.
You're training an attack chicken?
An attack chicken?
Do chickens like to read?
Sure they do.
What's their favorite book?
Lord of the Wings.
An attack chicken. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, really. How do you motivate them?
I use a cardboard cutout of Colonel Sanders.
Whoa, that sounds effective.
Sounds like it's time for the Chad Miles Report.
With the dumbest news of the week.
Coffee stain on his collar, name tag hanging wrong, sleep in both of his eyes, red light flashing strong. He shuffles up to the camera, cracked mug, crooked tie, says, I've seen some stupid stories, but this one made me cry. Oh man, it's the Chad Miles Report headlines, the dumbest news of the week. From Florida man fights lawnmower to info licks with concrete. We tune in for the train wreck. We can't stop, we lean in to read. Yeah, the Chad Miles Report, screaming the dumbest news of the week. So dumb, so sweet. Breaking cat stuck in a sweater, breaking toast that looks like a face. Council meets about a pigeon who keeps pooping on the mayor's briefcase. He's deadpan reading disaster, that's really just a broken cone. Nation shocked, he says then Snickers by a kid who married his phone. It's the Chad Miles Report headlines, the dumbest news of the week. Grandma banned from local bingo for allegedly counting too quick. We tune in for the train wreck. We act appalled while trying not to scream. Yeah, the Chad Miles Report, serving the dumbest news.
Well, you heard the snappy music, so it must be time for the Chad Miles Report. Chad, take it away.
Article number 1. Doctors at the Kursk Regional Hospital in Russia recently treated a 50-year-old man with an unusual MRI result. A nearly 5-inch long piece of wood extending from the man's eye socket to his skull,
Oh.
Oddity News reported on May 26th. Back in 2024, the patient, Yuri, of course his name's Yuri,
This
he's
is like Russia.
from
yeah.
Russia, was doing yard work. He wasn't wearing protective eye gear, obviously, so when he felt a sharp pain in his left eye, he assumed a small piece of wood had struck him while he was chopping maple branches. When the pain went away shortly thereafter, he forgot about it, dealing with it only occasionally when flashes of pain in the years that followed.
Years.
Ye-
He had that
Wow.
problem.
When he did seek medical help, ophthalmologists couldn't figure out what was wrong and their treatments were ineffective. Earlier this spring, his pain increased and his vision was starting to fade, so he headed for a hospital. A CT scan performed at the regional hospital showed that the foreign body was a branch that penetrated the eye socket, destroying the sinuses and damaging the base of the skull in dangerous proximity to vital brain structures, doctors
gosh.
said. Miraculously, doctors were able to remove the wood through the nasal passages.
Oh.
No brain surgery needed. Yuri's vision came
Wow.
back, and he is expected to make a full recovery.
That sounds painful. You would think he would have seen the branch, though, heading towards his eye, but I mean,
Yeah.
well,
They
apparently while he was suffering, Yuri switched from vodka to champagne. And you know, when the doctor saw the branch, he said, "Ah," because it was acute trauma.
Article number 2. A Wisconsin driver found out the hard way that road closed signs are there for a reason. According to UPI and the Wisconsin Department of Transportation's May 22nd social media post, a Milwaukee County driver not only encountered a road closed sign, but got out of their pickup truck, removed the sign, and drove straight into freshly poured concrete.
Oh, my no.
Wisconsin Department of Transportation shared a photo of the truck's submerged tires and noted that the drivers cemented their inability to adhere to signs.
What a dope.
Police and road crews had to employ heavy machinery to haul the truck out.
That's ridiculous. You know, when they arrested her, the police noted she really pulled out all the stops.
Now, why did you say she? The article said they got out of their truck.
Oh. So it was a non-binary.
I think they were trying to camouflage what you just pointed out.
That's funny.
Article number 3. Benjamin Fregale, age 23 of Palm Harbor, Florida, was arrested for felony criminal mischief on May 24th after vandalizing a local marquee sign known for its puns.
Crazy.
The smoking gun reported. The smoking gun is still around?
Yeah,
Wow.
because there's enough idiots to keep them in business.
That's old school. I like it. According to the police report, Fregale used bricks and branches to smash the sign, damaging the letters, message board, and interior lights. The sign belongs to a local chiropractic office, and memorable phrases include, "We never crack under pressure," "It's easier to throw out your back than your mother-in-law,"
Oh, that's an old joke.
"Hey-o," "We won't stop until everyone is cracked up," and "Our Easter adjustments are excellent."
Wow.
The message that made Fregale snap? Licensed crack dealer.
Now, you could see if it was an old person thinking, oh, this is bad, you know.
He's 23.
He's 23, and he's mad at the chiropractors for saying licensed crack dealer.
You can besmirch Easter, but don't talk about my crack.
Right. The arrest report indicates that Fregale thought the statement was illegal, but court records do not corroborate the claim. Fregale remains detained while he awaits a court hearing. They kept
I
him
think actually he did go to court, and in his defense, he actually made a pun back saying, "I just made a little adjustment."
Really?
No.
Oh.
But it's a chiropractor, see?
But that would be genius if he did that.
If he did that, yeah.
Maybe I could be his attorney.
Hey.
There you go.
I have nice shirts.
Are those cats with pistols?
And cactuses.
That's awesome. I love it.
You
Are you going to sell that merch on the website? That'd be a good idea.
Maybe. Once we start selling something, maybe.
Article number 4. A Grand Traverse, Michigan woman was found to have an entire bottle of wine in her person while being booked in the county jail. Monique,
Don't imagine when Chad is reading this. Don't try to solve the mystery.
just let it play out.
I know what people.
Just
Yeah.
let it play.
Where is she storing it? Don't let it go through your head.
Monique Menciani, age 48 of Michigan, was arrested for trespassing at a pharmacy in Grand Traverse, the Smoking Gun Report did. Oh, another Smoking Gun article.
Wow.
On May 22nd. After checking her for weapons, officers attempted to load her into the squad car. According to the police report, during this time, Menciani advised that she was not able to get into the vehicle. After some convincing, Menciani was able to slowly maneuver herself into the back seat. As she was being
Wow.
booked in the county jail, a female corrections deputy completed one more physical check of Menciani when, according to the report, it was learned that Menciani had concealed a bottle of Cupcake Vineyards Pinot Grigio inside her person.
I smell a sponsorship deal coming up.
It keeps saying inside her person. Let's kind of...
Yeah, that's
Is
what I
that what-
say. Don't
yeah,
imagine.
Okay. Don't ask, don't tell. In addition to her trespassing charges, she was charged with attempting to smuggle contraband into a penal institution. A former counselor at a substance abuse treatment center, Menciani faces prior convictions for robbery and credit card theft.
Wow. Like I said before, I don't want to know the orifice, but
A
you could
bottle
just
of wine.
imagine this Cupcake Vineyards. They could have a commercial. So good, you'll want to store it for later. I mean, what was she thinking? Like at some point she would be in this containment cell and she could just like take it out and consume it.
She's
Nobody's
seen
around.
way too many movies.
Yeah. It's not a shank, it's a full bottle.
Article number 5. A car buyer in Kansas has to wait a little longer to collect their new pickup truck from the Olathe Ford Lincoln dealership. According to UPI, a dealership employee found a robin's nest in one of the F-250's tires. Active robin's nests are federally protected and cannot be moved. I did not know
Wow.
that. This may be the only F-250 in America currently protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, the dealership said on social media. After a few days, the 4 eggs in the nest hatched. We want to give a huge thank you to our incredibly kind and understanding customers who have been so patient and thoughtful while we wait for these little ones to grow up and leave the nest safely, the dealership said.
Wow.
I would think you could back out of the deal during that time, but I guess they wanted the truck that badly. But that's really strange. And I have to say that the governor of California laid several bad eggs, and they could not remove him either.
He's protected.
That's
It's
right.
protected, yeah.
Chad and Christopher, thank you so much for being with us this week. Up next is Steve Bonta with the New American Magazine. In a moment. Our guest today is Dr. Steve Bonta. Dr. Steve Bonta is publisher of The New American, a magazine from the John Birch Society. He is also a longtime contributor to the magazine. He has extensive experience living abroad, including in Argentina, Spain, India, Sri Lanka, and most recently China. He holds a degree in literature from Penn State, as well as degrees in linguistics from BYU and Cornell. He is the author of Inside the United Nations and hundreds of articles for The New American on a wide range of subjects over more than 25 years. More information on the John Birch Society can be found at jbs.org. Dr. Steve Bonta, welcome to the Bruce Collins Show.
Hey, Bruce, great to be here. Thanks.
It's great to have you. Now, I spoke to Dr. Wayne Morrow a couple months ago, and that was a great conversation. And I've known about the John Birch Society for many years. I interviewed people like G. Edward Griffin. I was a Ron Paul supporter. That's his picture right there. Kind of hard to see. And so I know I read Ralph Epperson's book back in I think the late 80s, and he talked very well of the John Birch Society. How did you become involved with the John Birch Society?
Oh, that's a pretty long story. I guess, various friends over the years introduced me in stages. I was raised to be kind of a Northeast liberal, and I started to change in the 1980s when Reagan was elected. I guess that kind of dates me, but because I heard all these terrible things about Reagan, and my sort of looking at him, I thought, well, he doesn't seem that bad. And then I started listening to Rush Limbaugh, and that was, so that was kind of a process. At a certain point, I got in touch with got in contact with the John Birch Society when I was in graduate school out in Utah many years ago. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat. But anyway, yeah, and I was impressed with the materials that they offered and their perspective, which seemed to me to be was then and now, unswervingly not just constitutionalist, but kind of had a fuller picture than anyone else of my acquaintance, any other groups. So yeah, and I started writing for the New American in 1998, I think it was, almost 30 years ago. I contributed my first article.
Wow. So how do people subscribe to the New American first, and how do they join the John Birch Society?
Well, thenewamerican.com is our website, and you can subscribe to our monthly magazine either in printed form if you want, or in digital form, whatever be your preference. And the website also has lots of other stuff that's not behind a paywall. We put stories and analysis up on a daily basis. The John Birch Society is jbs.org, and membership details are there. Also, if you join the John Birch Society, part of the package is that you receive a complimentary subscription to the New American magazine. Not all of our subscribers are JBS members, but goodly a portion of them are.
Mm-hmm. So I've interviewed Patrick Wood probably a dozen times over many years, and he's written an article for the New American this month. Can you tell us about some of the important issues your magazine has been covering as of late?
Well, we try to cover, whatever seems to be the most important. We have covered a great deal on, Patrick Wood, and others have written on
Technocracy.
what's called, pardon me?
Technocracy.
Yeah, technocracy related articles. This is actually not a new topic, although we haven't really covered it historically until fairly recently, but the technocracy has been around since at least the 1930s, possibly earlier than that. Has been a movement to try to redefine government and society in terms of technology, and so that's one of his specialties. We've had quite a few other material. We recently did an update on a 30-year update on our famous conspiracy issue. Back in 1996, we published a special issue called Conspiracy for Global Control, and it was at the time the only instance of a major publication of record, devoting an entire issue to what was then viewed as a completely toxic and irresponsible subject, because people who talk about the C word by definition are tinfoil hat extremists. At least that was the narrative and the way the Overton window at the time was situated. Obviously, things have changed a lot in 30 years, thanks to Jeffrey Epstein and all kinds of other, COVID and other factors have really red-pilled a lot of people. And so we decided it was time to do an update on this topic. So we recently kind of did a new version of that, and we're in the early stages of getting it out there. But we do think, and this is it's always been one of the distinctives of the John Birch Society, is that we have not shied away from the fact that a lot of the bad things that are happening to our country and our civilization are being done by design, i.e. conspiratorially. They're not just happenstance. They're not happening entirely as a result of, laws of human behavior or what have you, but they're being driven by conspiratorially minded individuals who have as their end goal the destruction of the United States in the form that we have always known it, and Western civilization writ large along with it. So is something that, we used to get, the woo factor is pretty high, and people it used to be a tremendous turnoff for a lot of people who were otherwise, responsible, sensible, conservative people who understood the Constitution, free market economics. But when you bring up the C word, their eyes glaze over and they don't want to talk about it. So that's not as much the case now, needless to say. And
Yeah.
I would have to say, perversely, probably have Jeffrey Epstein to thank for that in large measure, because that was really a remarkable turning point in the history of the country. It really drew back the curtain a little bit and gave people in all walks of life a glimpse at what we've been maintaining all along, namely that the way that the people in charge who run things are different personages than most people imagine them to be, A, and B, these are their motives are a good deal more sinister than most people would like to presume. So
Mhm.
anyway,
And, a lot of people look at that as that C word, conspiracy, but really, if you go into the writings of many of these people over the years and some of their books that they've published, you can access their words and see that this was a plan all along. I know Zbigniew Brzezinski, for instance, he wrote a book and he talked about how he was a communist. So, and was it Quigley that wrote Hope and Tragedy?
Tragedy and Hope, yes, Carol Quigley.
Tragedy.
He was a professor of political science, I think, at Georgetown University for many decades, and was very influential, and and still is. I mean, Tragedy and Hope, I think, probably infuriated the people we call the insiders, the people who are, because he says, in effect, there does exist this secret international network committed to globalist goals. It operates in some ways in some respects, the way that Americans imagine the communists operate. And he said, I've been part of it for many years. I've been given access to its secret records. He wrote all this in Tragedy and Hope, which, if you saw it in a bookshop, you'd say, oh, there's just there's a tome on, on history. But in any case, excuse me, there I am. I just, my computer just dinged and I realized I had to turn off a web page to stop that from happening. Anyway, but he is well known, and at his inaugural ball at the beginning of his first term in office, Bill Clinton, back in the day, gave a speech in which he said, one person who helped clarify my vision of what I wanted to be was a professor of mine at Georgetown University, Carroll Quigley. He mentioned his name, and that caused a lot of eyebrows to go up among the John Birch Society New American reader set. Nobody else knew who the guy was, had any idea of how significant he was. So, obviously, that network was, whatever they call themselves, was not happy with Quigley's revelations, but there you have it. And it's always more convincing when you get that sort of admission against interest. I mean, it's one thing if people like us say, oh, there's a conspiracy. You will say, oh, well, you're just saying that because you want to get clicks, or or because that's, it's confirmation bias. You believe that anyway, and you see conspiracies everywhere. But if someone who's actually a liberal academic professor of considerable stature says, oh, yes, there is actually, here's how it operates. And what's more, I'm sympathetic with its goals, except for the fact that I don't think it should be as secretive. And that's essentially what Quigley says. That is very persuasive. So, in fact, that was what persuaded me, because I remember going to a speech by then president of JBS president John McManus, now deceased, and while I was in graduate school, and I liked everything he was saying about Americanism, American values, and the free market, and the Federal Reserve, all this stuff. But he finally gets around the conspiracy, and I thought, oh boy, here we go. Let's see what he has to say. And he mentioned Carroll Quigley and that book, Tragedy Hope, which I'd never heard of. And so I thought, okay, fine. I'll go to the university library tomorrow and I'll find that book for myself and see what it does. And I went to the library, got it off, checked it off, took it home, started looking through it, and there it was, And I remember telling my wife, my goodness, this guy's talking about conspiracy. And it's in this big, thick history book that looks like something you'd use for an open, a beginning, like a general ed course in world history or something. And there it is. It was really quite surprising. So I wish more people were open-minded enough to look into that for themselves. But nevertheless, we now have, as a new resource, our special conspiracy issue out there, and we'll see what the response is.
Now, are you surprised that I think a lot of people had hope that in some ways President Trump would be different? And I think in terms of immigration, he has done a lot of good things, but we're now at war, and it seems endless, with Iran. Um, did that surprise you when it happened?
Well, when the war actually broke out, it didn't surprise me because Trump very unwisely committed America to a path of action. And it was a very heartbreaking thing that happened. I mean, the people in Iran at the end of last year, right before New Year's, started turning out, I mean, in desperation because their economy is falling apart, and they've been victims of abuse and oppression for so long. So they started demonstrating on a mass scale, and we all know what happened. The government went out and just pitilessly slaughtered tens of thousands of, most of them very nice, promising young people. And the Western media yawned and had little to say about it because most of them aren't left-wingers. See, I mean, the young protesters who brought this current regime to power back in 1979 were a coalition of radical Islamists and communists in Iran. So back in those days, of course, the Western media portrayed them as these self-sacrificing heroes and great people and so forth. This time around, the media has done everything they can to make them look like a bunch of irresponsible rowdies because they know that, so anyway, so that's a little bit of background. So then Trump comes out and very unwisely says, we've got your back, to the protesters, tells the government of Iran, you better not do anything to them or we're going to come and do something to you. And the government of Iran, which is typically, I mean, whatever else one may say about them, they are true believer religious fanatics. And as such, they're absolutely fearless of us. They think we're the great Satan and pretty soon, Allah is going to come down and smack us down. And so they truly believe that. So they went out and they butchered their own people, and they're still doing it. I mean, they're hanging people every day, college students and others that that were involved. Anyone they can catch, it's an absolute horror show in that country. But it's their horror show. But once Trump made that commitment, then of course that emboldened them, and so then he was left with two choices: either we renege on our word and say, now we're not getting involved, or we go in and basically launch an unconstitutional war. He chose the latter course, and here we are. It's very unfortunate, and I would hope that for the people of Iran, that it works out well for them. I've known many Iranians over the years, and it's an amazing country. A large number of them aren't even Muslim anymore. They're fed up with it. So it would be a great boon, I think, to human civilization if that government were to fall. That said, I don't think Trump is going to be, it looks like he's just lost interest and he's moving on to the next shiny object, which appears to be Cuba. And if past his prelude, he'll bluster and fulminate and talk about how no one's ever done anything about it before and then maybe send in some token military act. And then he'll do what he did in Venezuela, which is he'll basically cut a deal with the communists and they'll stay in place. So sorry, folks, not impressed with Trump's foreign policy at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, because in Venezuela, everyone's impressed with the extraction of Maduro and his wife. But newsflash, the country's still run by communists and they're still repressing freedom of speech. The economies, I mean, nothing has really changed except the actors at the top. Oh, and now we have an oil deal. So that makes it okay. I mean, I hate to sound like a cynical leftist, but it's hard not to when you see this kind of behavior. So, frankly, I got to say, his second term in office, his foreign policy is much less impressive than the first time around.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and again, we're speaking with Dr. Steve Bonta. He's the publisher of The New American, and you can find out more information on the John Birch Society at jbs.org. Now, Dr. Bonta, economically speaking, where's the country headed, particularly in light of this war? But we have massive debt. Where do you see us going from this point?
Well, if we continue on the course that we're following, that's kind of like asking the captain of a ship who's heading straight towards a reef, what do you think the outcome is going to be, right? If there's still time to correct course and avoid the reef, then the outcome need not be a disaster. I really don't know at this point if we've passed that point of no return. I mean, we're close to $40 trillion in debt now. And, the economy in some respects is doing very well, but we've been kind of on this course ever since we adopted the Federal Reserve System back more than a century ago, and then allowed FDR to take us off the gold standard, a process that was consummated actually by President Nixon when he closed the gold window back in the 1970s. So we have a totally fiat currency system now. We're totally at the mercy of whatever the venal bureaucrats and politicians in the Treasury Department and in the Federal Reserve want to do about the money supply. And because the US dollar, unlike, say, the Argentine peso, is the world's reserve currency, we do have a little more latitude than the Argentinas of the world in printing money. We can always export a lot of the effects of inflation to other countries while we are the beneficiaries. But this can't last forever because in the long run, and good economics, as Henry Hazlitt once observed, is always long-run economics. In the long run, the course that we're on will be bankruptcy and misery and the destruction of the dollar. So if you thought that German hyperinflation after World War I was interesting, just wait till you see what happens when the rest of the world finally concludes that the dollar is no longer a safe bet and they're no longer willing to buy our treasury bonds, our government debt, unless we offer very, very high rates of interest. When that day arrives, you're going to see an implosion the likes of which has never been seen in human history. Now, is it too late to correct course? I don't think so. Because actually, I mean, 35 trillion, whatever it is, $38 trillion is a lot of money, but then the dollar is not worth what it used to be. And our economy is still doing a lot of good things. I mean, in particular, the tech economy shows enormous potential growth upside, I suppose. I'm not a financial advisor, by the way, so this is to be taken with a grain of salt, but this is my observation. Inflation, as it's defined in the news media, i.e., cost of consumer, or it's a lot more than that, but for the sake of argument, let's look at inflation from that point of view, is still relatively low compared to the likes of Turkey or indeed Argentina or other countries like that, Russia. Lots of other countries have much higher rates of consumer inflation. So compared to most of the rest of the pack, we're still doing well. And I don't believe that China is going to overtake us anytime soon because they also have fiat currency and they all are making the same mistakes that we are. Their debt is also something like, it's well over, no one knows what it is, but it's well over 200% of the Chinese GDP. So China's also in dire straits. We could remedy it rather quickly by returning to a gold and silver standard, by phasing out the Federal Reserve System, and most crucially, by cutting back drastically the size of government. Argentina has done this. Now, Argentina, under the Argentine Constitution, their president, Javier Milei, does have more power to do that kind of stuff than our president does. But even if Trump had more power, I don't think he'd do it because I don't think he is what people call a fiscal conservative. He's a big spender. And this is a reality. I mean, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are Trump supporters, but that is a reality of Trump, both terms. And it's not just because of COVID. I mean, he spends a lot of money on things. He's in some ways still has the soul of an old-fashioned big government Democrat. And even if that were not so, really it would be incumbent on Congress to muster, because under the Constitution, Congress is supposed to hold the purse strings. And the president, we blame everything on the president and give the president credit, as the case may be. But really, Congress, in fiscal matters, has the final say, as it should. But it has so thoroughly abrogated most of its responsibilities in that regard. And the budget process is so broken that it's hard to see politically a way back. So it's kind of like, the ship is heading toward the proverbial shoals, and the shoals are still many, many miles away. But the crew is fighting amongst themselves. There's a mutiny attempt. The captain, no one's at the tiller, or people grab the tiller intermittently until someone else, pushes them away. And so there's total chaos on the ship's crew. And meanwhile, the ship continues to head toward the shoals because they're fighting over who gets to hold the tiller and whether they're going to turn the ship to the right or the left to avoid the catastrophe. That's kind of where we are.
Yeah. Before the Great Recession occurred in 2008, I was listening to a financial podcast, and coincidentally, they were teaching me about, and I'm no expert, but about Austrian economics. And I realized through that podcast that the country, Democrats and Republicans, seem to be Keynesian. Is Keynesian part of the puzzle piece in terms of economics as to why we are failing?
Well, sure. I mean, Keynesianism is sort of a watered down. It's a type of collectivism, to be sure. I mean, John Maynard Keynes was the guy who helmed the Bretton Woods conference in New Hampshire at the end of World War II, which set up the post-war financial system, including creating the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, neither of which are as consequential as people think. The really consequential part of Bretton Woods was Keynes's abortive attempt to set up a global currency, which he wanted to call the Bancor, and that didn't fly politically. And so instead, the fallback position was, well, we need to have some kind of a global reserve currency. Let it be the US dollar. And that was what was agreed upon. And so from that day to this, we have enjoyed, we consumers of the US dollar, producers of the US dollar, have enjoyed a unique and sort of unnatural ascendancy over the world finances, because people have to buy oil in dollars. People, when currencies are exchanged, they're all reckoned in terms of the dollar. So the dollar has this dominant position, and that has allowed us, I think, to indulge in inflationism to a degree that would have long ago bankrupted any other country. Okay, so Keynes was certainly a fan. He understood inflation very well, but he also felt that it was something that needed to happen. He was a fan of big government regulation of the economy, and his views of economics are widely accepted. They're totally at variance with what is sometimes called Austrian economics. I would say, free market or laissez-faire economics is probably a better term for it, because prior to the first Austrian economist, who was a man named Karl Menger, there were other people like Frederick Bastiat and Jean-Baptiste Say, who also really had a very, very clear understanding of laissez-faire economics in all of its aspects, including finance and money and so forth. So, but that pedigree really, I guess, came together from Menger and then his student Eugen von Böhm-Bawerk. It's a mouthful, I know, who happened to also be Austrian, hence the name Austrian. And then his student, Ludwig von Mises, was also Austrian. And then von Mises, who ended up coming to the United States in the early 20th century, was the most and remains the most influential, but one of his students, Murray Rothbard, also very influential. And in fact, I would recommend anyone who really wants to understand free market economics, which is the true economics, quite honestly, you should take the time to read Murray Rothbard's 2-volume book. What is it now? Man, Economy, and State, I guess. Anyway, his treatise on economics. Human Action by von Mises is also good, but it's a much denser read, and better to read Rothbard first, who is maybe a better popularizer to some extent. And then there's a nice little book called Economics in One Lesson by a non-Austrian, although he is Austrian in spirit. Henry Hazlitt was. He's deceased now, but it's a wonderful elucidation of all of the central fallacies implicit in government interventionism in economics. So, unfortunately, the United States, for all of our lip service to the free market, to capitalism, as it's sometimes called, although I don't like that term because that was a coinage of Marx and Engels, actually. So capitalism was a term used by, the enemies of the free market. But in any case, the United States has always had an interventionist, or if you will, a Keynesian streak, long before Keynesian was even alive. Alexander Hamilton, certainly one of the most illustrious founding fathers, was one of them. And his view was always that the federal government should have a robust role in directing the resources of the economy in ways that are, kind of pleasing to the visionaries, the alleged visionaries who run the government. His Report on Manufactures, one of his major works, argues that very plangently, and gave birth to what's called like the American School of Economics, which was a thing all through the 19th century. This idea that laissez-faire economics, as argued for by certain European economists like Say and later, von Mises and their ilk, that's really not going to work for us. We need to have government, having an active role. So that would surprise Americans, but this is very much part of our culture. We've never really been, at least where national policy is concerned, a truly free market country. Now, locally, we once were. That's no longer the case. I mean, you can't start a business anymore without the federal government being involved in everything you do, right? You have to starting with
Right.
you have to have, your business, your tax number, all this stuff. So, but that was at one time not the case, and so at least at the local level, we had a reasonable approximation of laissez-faire economics for many generations. But as a matter of national policy, there have always been lots of people in Washington who have wanted to use the power of the federal government along Hamiltonian lines. And so Keynes really is kind of the 20th century, version of that on steroids, so to speak, because Keynes, like most modern day collectivists, couldn't conceive of any problem that couldn't be solved by the creative application of government force. And certainly that applied to all of the alleged inequities and injustices associated with the free market, which, again, if you understand free market economics, most of the claims about the evils of capitalism fall apart. They're not true. They're based on fallacious reasoning. But very few people understand that. So Keynes has kind of become the whipping boy nowadays, though he's had many successors, Krugman and others, who have, continued to carry the torch. And I think part of the reason for this is that most economists are in the pay of government. They make, very large sums of money doing government consultancy, sitting on boards of economic advisors. So of course they're going to see a positive role of government in economics. If they say, well, I think that the role of government should be strictly negative, i.e. protect individuals against fraud and violence and be essentially an impartial arbiter and leave it at that, and then allow the market to solve the problems that the market solve, well, you're not going to get any jobs, are you? You're not going to get
Right.
you're not going to get to sit on flashy councils and appear on CNN and Fox News and this type of thing. But if you do make that key concession to Keynesianism, that government needs to be involved, well, so we have that. The reality is we live in the world of Keynes now. This whole edifice of constitutionally illegitimate government soup agencies, a large part of which are consecrated to, micromanaging the U.S. economy. All of that has come about because Keynes, in effect, at least for now, has won the debate. And most people don't really think very deeply about economics, unfortunately. But if they think about it at all, they kind of say, yeah, I guess if we don't do that, then you're going to cut through capitalism and you're going to have price gouging and all these other things that you hear that are the alleged features of untrammeled free market, of laissez-faire. People tend to default to that and think that government, where the economy is concerned, needs to have essentially a parental role, as Keynes, in effect, and his epigones all recommend.
Now, Keynes, I believe, was from the UK. Can we make a connection to the Fabians with Keynes?
Well, he was a Fabian, sure.
Okay.
Most people of stature in UK politics, particularly on the left, of the last 120 years have been Fabians. Every single Labour prime minister, including Starmer, the current one, have all been Fabians, members of the Fabian Society. And a very goodly portion of other prominent leftists, certainly leftist economists. The London School of Economics was a Fabian project. So, it all comes out of that. And again, Keynesianism is soft socialism, which is essentially what Fabianism is. Fabians have the same goal as gimlet-eyed Marxist revolutionaries. They just believe that they need to do it more gradually, that people need to be conditioned before they can bring about their perfect society. And I have to say the Fabians are being proven right by history, okay? Because people now have been conditioned, as I just mentioned, even in the United States, that supposed bastion of individualism and free market economics had been conditioned to accept most of the premises of this kind of soft socialism light embodied by Keynes and others, okay? Were it otherwise, people would be in open revolt against what's going on with people, but they're not. People say, oh, well, obviously, when we have a recession or this or that, it's because there's something wrong with the free market, so we have to have government to do something about that. So, the Fabians have succeeded admirably with not admirably, but they've succeeded. What's the right word? They've succeeded by their lights in convincing the better part of the Christian Western world that socialism is the way of the future. Now, they may not be openly saying that the way AOC and Mamdani do, right? But Americans believe in it, and most Americans believe in Social Security, the sacrosanctity of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and all these other programs, because, well, we've had them for too long and they're part of America. They're American now. And so, yeah, well, they're also socialist and Keynesianism. How about them apples? I mean, that's the reality. But, we have a socialist medical system. We've got socialized medicine now. I remember as a kid that was still a bad word in many circles. It was a point of debate. No one really debates it anymore, do they?
Right.
We've had Obamacare for how long? It's not single payer socialized medicine. That's the next step, of course. And if we continue, we're going to get it, unless at some point people say, we're done with this. We're going to go back to a free market in medicine. Anyone who cares to look at the history of it can see that soaring medical costs started when? Right about 1965. Prior to that, they were level. And through that period, generations previous to 1965, well, we had constant increases in medical technology, new machines, new drugs, all this stuff. Obviously, it wasn't a patch on what we have now, but still, it was a procedure. Medical care available the year I was born, 1964, was incomparably better than 20 years before that or 40 years before that. And yet, through all that time, the cost was essentially the same. The cost and the types of services. Up through about the early 60s, doctors still made house calls. It was still pretty standard, and then all of a sudden, it starts doing this. But what happened in 1965? The beginning of the process of socialized medicine via the Great Society legislation of the Johnson era. And then the HMOs were created in the 1970s and on and on and on. So, so of course it's driven up prices and caused scarcity. And I mean, it's amazing. I was out of the United States for 4 years, and I'm just now reaching the age where rather frequent visits to the doctor have become an expedient. I'm in my 60s now, so little things start happening, and sooner or later, big things will start happening, right? And it's incredible to me that it sometimes takes 6 weeks to 2 months now to get a doctor's appointment, at least where I live here in Wisconsin. And when I was a kid, I remember having, get the flu or whatever, and mom would call the doctor's office and, you come in this afternoon. Whatever. Now you can't do that anymore. You have to go to urgent care if you want urgent care, but you can't actually go to see your family doctor unless you set and why is this happening? Because we have socialized medicine. And if you think and of course now the left is saying, well, but see, this isn't working. So we have to do what England does and have a single payer system. Single payer, it means that the government totally takes over the healthcare system. It becomes essentially an appendage of the government. That's what they want. Okay. And I don't see a lot of people offering principled opposition to this. And unfortunately, Americans, the more they suffer under the exactions of the current socialist system socialism light system that we have, the more they're going to clamor for more of the same, because government is always happy to set itself up as the solution to the problems that it creates, whether it's problems with inflation, with the currency, and pricing, whether it's problems with medical care or anything else, that you would care to consider when you see systemic scarcity and soaring prices. That government is the culprit. Okay, it's not wicked capitalism. It's not that earthquake that happened on the other side of the world or whatever it happened, or even a war. I mean, wars like the one right now can cause temporary price disruptions. Trump is right. If the war is resolved, gas prices will go down to some extent, but they're still a whole lot higher than they were 20 years ago or 40 years ago, because inflation, it has become a fact. They're still printing money as they always did. Okay.
You mentioned inflation. Now, if the dollar collapses, given that every other country has fiat currency, what becomes the dominant reserve currency? And at that point, we don't have a gold standard. Would they revert back to that? It's unlikely given what we know about their political stance. And also during the 30s, they actually made gold illegal. They confiscated it. So would they do that at that point?
Quite possibly. Yeah, I mean, I think that the end game would be to try to to create a global fiat currency emitted by a global central bank, which could be, I think, fairly easily created by reconditioning the Bank for International Settlements, which is the central banker's central bank, headquartered in Basel, Switzerland, and essentially make them the world's central bank. But I mean, Bruce, this is the problem when people refuse to educate themselves. All right, and I don't want to sound like pointing finger and saying, it's everybody else's fault and this sort of that, but it is a fact that a large proportion of Americans have very strong opinions on economics,
Right,
and healthcare and all the other issues of the day, but don't really haven't read about it, don't understand economics, and so this is just until that is remedied, until we restore enough education. I mean, we're never going to get everybody to say, okay, everybody's going to read economics in one lesson and the Federalist Papers and all that. I recognize that is a hopeless enterprise. But if we even had 5% of the population or 10% that were familiar with some of these things, these principles, it would have a drastic effect on politics. We wouldn't have, for example, a president who is busily trying to get rid of the most principled congressman that we have in Congress, one of the few people who actually understands how the free market economics
would
works.
that be Thomas Massie?
That would be Thomas Massie, who tomorrow Trump is trying to primary down in Kentucky, because Massie has been critical of his waging of Trump's unconstitutional wars and some of his economic policies. And, so Thomas Massie, and now he's coming down on Lauren Boebert for supporting Massie and is trying to primary her. That's breaking news since the weekend, because again, loyalty is the most important thing. And as long as we, unfortunately, this is not to downplay some of the good things that have been done both by Trump and the MAGA movement, restoring some sense of, pride in the country, obviously getting control over the immigration. That's a major achievement. But if we continue to allow ourselves to be ruled by cults of personality, masquerading as political parties, or in the case of Trump, an individual heading a populist movement, instead of saying, well, all this may sound good, but what does it mean from a constitutionalist, Republican, and maybe free market perspective? Then we're going to continue to have these kinds of issues, because Trump talks a good game about, let's say, getting rid of the income tax. He's actually talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And he's even questioned the Federal Reserve. But has he actually done anything about it? And is he actually going to do anything about it? Paint me as skeptical. I'd be happy to be wrong. I would be happy to get egg on my face 6 months from now. Trump suddenly announces that he is recommending, phasing out of the federal income tax, and the Federal Reserve System, and restoring, doing all this sort of thing, in addition to truly pursuing an America First policy and ceasing once and for all of our interventionist adventures abroad. But I don't think we're going to see that. And even if we do see it, under our system, the president has relatively limited powers. He's not supposed to be an elective Caesar. It's Congress that's supposed to do these things, and hopefully more or less in coordination with the president. And I don't see anywhere near in Congress anywhere near that sort of consensus that, hey, we've really apostatized from our constitutionalist, individualist, and free market roots. Let's get back to that. I'm not seeing that. And that the Republicans are closer than the Democrats, certainly. Our own Freedom Index shows that very clearly. But still, if you're voting 60% of the time instead of 100% of the time for the Constitution and for freedom, that's still problematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, for more information on the John Birch Society, go to jbs.org. We've been speaking with Dr. Steve Bonta. He's the publisher and contributor at the New American Magazine. And again, Steve, remind us of the website for the New American.
Yeah, thenewamerican.com.
Okay, excellent.
All lowercase. It's easy to find. We're the only New American out there.
Great. Dr. Steve Bonta, thank you so much for being my guest this week. I hope I can have you back again sometime.
Thanks, Bruce. Happy to be here. Anytime.
Thank you for joining us this week. Really appreciate it. If you would, please like this video and subscribe to the Bruce Collins Show channel. That helps us a lot with the algorithm so we can spread this show over many eyeballs. Also, I have another channel if you're interested. It's Bruce Collins Reacts and Stuff, where I look at some of the mysterious, interesting videos out on YouTube and I react to them. I think you'll like that too. In the meantime, we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Flip on the switch, feel the static clear, naming the glow, yeah, the reason we're here. From the edge of the map to your kitchen chair, he's talking wild truth like he owns the air. Out past the highway, out past the mall, where the sand keeps secrets, you can hear that call. It's the Bruce Collins Show. The buried up broadcasting, taking control from the desert wind to your radio. We're the loyal knights of the wobbly table, laughing loud, keeping legends stable. Yeah, the Bruce Collins Show. Funeral rides high over dust and stone, stories like sparks in a cyclone. Strange little kingdom made of coffee and chords, where the late night callers become the lords. Crowns made of stickers, capes made of flannel, we pledge our oaths to the glowing panel. It's the Bruce Collins Show. The buried up broadcasting, still in the glow, from the desert wind to your radio. We're the loyal knights of the wobbly table, raising mugs, making myths and fables. Yeah, the Bruce Collins Show.
It's a wrap, falafelites. This has been a Bad Yodeler production. Good night.